Welcome back to TV47 News Tonight with me, Abu Bakr Abdullahi. Thank you for staying with us. Let's get to that interview that I preempted earlier on. Our guest tonight is Professor Kivutha Kibwana, who is Makueni governor, and joins us on the broadcast now. Prof, good evening. Thank you for making time for us tonight.
All viewers.
All right, Prof, you say you have listened to the voice of Wanjiku asking you to run for presidency in the coming election, that you are available, ready and willing to be Wanjiku's president. You are a professor, facts matter, so does empirical evidence matter. What evidence do you attach to these claims?
Thank you for that very important question, because in about 2018, there was a movement where people were asking me to run for the presidency, and they actually they said apende asipende, and there was a lot of activity in the social media about that movement, and even people approached me and said that I should run for the presidency because they thought from some of what we are doing in Makueni, it was possible for that to be transferred to Kenya. But you may also remember that in the 90s, when I was the spokesperson of the National Convention Executive Council, that is the movement which was spearheading the Katiba. Again, specifically in 1997, I was being asked to be a compromise presidential candidate. But during that time, I said I was not ready because I wanted to really pursue the constitution-making process. So even in the 90s, and therefore more recently now, Kenyans have asked, and I know it's a huge number, because these days social media is a very, very, very important forum, because we have Kenyans the Kenyans who listen to, who operate in the social media are about 26 million.
All right, Prof, you have made your case. Prof, you have answered the question I have asked, but nonetheless, why in your view do you think all these people then who you are making reference to will want you to be the President of the Republic of Kenya?
Part of it is because, of course, they have seen some of what we have done in Makueni, in terms of the promotion of our health sector, because we were the first ones to do universal health care. Some of the industries, young industries, that we are trying to establish, and of course also the public participation that we have done. Many things that have happened in Makueni.
All right, and
because of some of those things,
we will talk of Makueni.
They have been able to say that they think within Kenya, we can also be in leadership.
All right, Prof, we will talk of Makueni, but nonetheless, I want us to talk and base these discussions on issues. Now that you want to be the President of the Republic of Kenya, and the first issue that I want us to talk about is the poverty index, which otherwise is the gap between the rich and the rest. When you hear statistics such as 0.1% of the population having as much as the combination of 99.9%, this is glaring inequity. How do you intend to bridge this gap between the rich and the rest?
I must apologize that my hearing gadget dropped down, and therefore I missed the first part of that question. And please, I beg your indulgence so that you may repeat it.
All right, Prof, I want us to base this discussion on issues. And the first one is on the poverty index in the country, the gap between the rich and the rest. When you hear statistics such as 0.1% of Kenya's population having as much as the 99.9% combined, this paints a picture of inequality and a rising gap between the rich and the rest. How do you intend to bridge this gap as a president?
You are very right, because that gap is due to the fact that although we say our growth rate is about 6% or 5%, the majority of that growth goes to very few people, and you are right in that. And there are many ways in which, first of all, to make the economy be broadened so that it is not just enjoyed by one group of people. If you take the question of, for example, even land, there's a lot of land which is occupied by people and they don't do anything on it. It is just idle. And if through land reform you were to make that land available so that those who can develop it are able to do that. For example, many young people want to do agriculture and they are not even allowed land by their parents, and there is a lot of land which is idle. So that would be one area of looking at land reform. When it comes to capital is extremely expensive. And even it's not easy for communities to make their small banks so that they can access capital and the interests are low. So one other aspect where one would have to look is the cost of capital so that it's available to the majority of the people.
And by capital, you mean we will lend more to the people?
I mean that making capital precisely, making sure that there is financial inclusion. For example, in Makueni, we have a loan we call Tedeka, where we give it to people for 3% administrative cost. And as you know, even within the Islamic tradition, there are loans which are given without interest. So that is what we are saying. There are very many small-scale people, SMEs, who want to do business, but they cannot access loans easily. Again, as you know, many of the poor people are not able to really afford quality education. If there was more access to quality education, so that people are trained properly, they have proper skills, then they would be able to access markets, they would be able to become entrepreneurs. So
all right, Prof,
even in our country,
in the answer to the question, you talked of various issues. At this point, let's talk briefly on land. You say if land can be of use, it will be of help to the young people of this country. Equally, at that point, there is a lot of land that is in wrong hands, some historically, while others could have been grabbed. Will you guarantee, if elected as a president, that you will implement the reports on land?
The law clearly says that public land, which is in private hands, should go back to the public. So that is something that is not really contestable. And again, if you have land which you don't use and it is idle, either it is taxed to the extent that you realize that it is better that this land was, either you sold it or the land was made available through a leasing mechanism, so that that land can be used for production. Again, many of our entrepreneurs, they don't. There isn't a lot of domestic production. We are depending a lot on imports, and some are cheap things and so on. So again, one would like to promote domestic production and make that easy. Make sure that there's infrastructure for growth, like the roads, the water, the electricity. So they are really, in terms of bringing a manifesto, bring something that to do, which I want to do with the people themselves. There are many things that are easy to do in our country, and we go into a growth trajectory.
All right, Prof, let's move from the question of the economics and the land now and get to political unity of the country. Some will view you as a person who has already failed in uniting his political backyard, in this case, the Kamba Base. How do you intend then to unite a country, if at all there are glaring disunity for this matter, at least by the political elite from your political backyard?
I think the question of focusing on the 46 ethnic groups, so that there is a logic of initially you must get votes from your area and you take a lot of time getting votes from your area, I think we need a different approach. So that you look at Kenya, you say that my politics are about the unity of all Kenyans, the unity of all sectors, not just the unity of the elite.
But Prof, one would suppose that charity begins at home.
We want to make that different. Like young people are saying that that's not what they want to do. They don't want to be taken back to tribal or ethnic cocoons. They want a new Kenya. Even many of them relate to countries abroad because they think that they are young people, they need to succeed like everybody else. Even many of them leave our countries to go abroad. So we want to change the narrative so that, yes, I respect all our ethnic groups. I respect culture. I even write in Kikamba, poetry in Kikamba as well as in English. But we want to actually say that those who are insisting on tribal politics, that is those are ancient people. We want really all those young people, they go to school and they are in schools from all ethnic groups. They interrelate. They grow into being Kenyans, into being Africans, into being internationalists, and not to be captured in the cocoon of a tribe. Nothing really happens there. They are cheated that somebody is going to bring development to them, and there is no development which happens.
All right, Prof, that some would argue again as though it is being too ideal, however liberal it may sound, understanding the political context this country is in. Where you are from, your political goodwill backyard matters, doesn't it? You're a long-serving politician, you know this better than I do.
You see, there are people who have always wanted to drive politics that way. But if you look at successful countries abroad, you find that they actually focus on patriotism, they focus on nationalism, they focus on from the point of view of the country, so that we talk about national unity, continental unity, East African community, and so on. But if you really make impact at the national level, you make impact everywhere, and you make impact in whatever cultural community that you go into. Because I am not saying that it's not important to have support there. You should have support there, and you should have support in the 45 units. You should have support among all the young people, the professionals, labor, farmers, women, youth, everybody, so that we begin to rebuild a different Kenya where, you know, we don't discriminate on account of ethnicity, religion, and things like that, so, gender.
Fair point, Prof. Yep. Your Machakos counterpart has also declared an interest in vying for the position that you have also declared an interest in. Two presidential candidates rather, if it is supposed to be in 2022 from the same region. Does this pose any danger?
I don't think so. Alfred has declared he wants to be president. I think Alonso also has declared he wants to be president. Ultimately, it is Kenyans who are going to choose. We shall talk to Kenyans. We shall talk to Wanjiku. And it's a question of, from all other candidates who have declared, who will convince Wanjiku that they can do better for her. So, because we are in a democracy, you cannot tell anybody, don't stand. But I know at the end of the day, the success will be about people who are now tired of the old politics of an ethnicity, negative ethnicity. Politics of being promised things that never happen, corruption and all that. So I have no problem with many people, and in the past, many people have stood and some of them have not really excited Kenyans.
All right, this is a question that I already know its answer to, but nonetheless, let me ask you, which party then will you use as a political vehicle to seek this interest of yours?
My campaign is going to be different because it is actually a people-based campaign. We are going to have, and this is part of what has started already, people with their institutions, whether it is some unions, whether it is universities, professionals, whether it is even people of different political parties. So that people say we are going to pool our parties together, the way there was Ford, the way there was CORD, the way there was NASA, which is about dead. So that it's a movement for New Kenya. So at this point, because there will be many parties which will come together, and initially I used to be in Muungano party before I went into Poipa.
Yes.
So there are all these parties that we are going to bring together, and we shall now decide how to get the presidential candidate and the deputy and so on, how they will stand.
All right, and as you bring these other parties together, which party then will be the lead flag bearer that will propose you as its presidential candidate?
You see, because now it is 2 years to the elections, and this is a movement that we are building, at this point in time, that is not a decision that I can myself alone make, because all the parties that to come together, all the civil society movements, the citizens movements, and so on, just like the way we put NAC together, because NAC, those days when I was in civil society, we were actually the first people to start bringing the opposition together. And there was NAC, and then there was NCC. Then when Kibaki, President Kibaki, then he wasn't, Ngilu, Wamalwa, and all those people, we brought those together, and civil society actually did endorse President Kibaki. So we have some experience in terms of
bringing parties together.
Bringing parties together, bringing civil society together, organizations together.
Fair point, Prof. Fair point. Many will argue, and this we have seen also in the comments on our social media platforms, that you have an impressive track record in as far as your leadership is concerned. But nonetheless, there are dots to your leadership and you, the person, as well. And this is to the 207, 208 skirmishes. You are in the government. Why did you not advise President Mwai then to extinguish, if not rather, look into the political flames that were tearing this country apart?
President Mwai Kibaki, give him credit. When he decided that there was going to be a coalition government, or the Nusu Mukate government, there were people who were refusing, who were telling him that there is no reason for you to concede, you won, you shouldn't concede whatsoever. And I think our point was reached where he decided that he was going to make that decision despite very senior politicians telling him things to the contrary.
And before even before even the compromised political deal was reached, why did you, among many others who are in the political inner circles of Mwai Kibaki, not intervene? And I asked you this, Prof, at the backdrop of what you said in 2008, I believe January the 2nd, and this is an international media that has quoted you to have said, and I quote, "It is becoming clear that these well-oriented acts of genocide and ethnic cleansing were well-planned, financed, and rehearsed by the Orange Democratic Movement leaders prior to the general election." This looked as though you are pointing fingers to one side rather than solving the problem that was in eyesight by then.
I think in terms of what advice you give, because of course when you give advice, you are not forcing people to take the advice. And even when you know, because I had actually a lot of knowledge of some of what was happening, even when you know things like that, you advise, and as I said, that is why ultimately the president was able to take the action that was necessary to stop that bloodletting. And even later, there were some people who still didn't want him to accept the new constitution, the 2010 constitution. And again, because of advice that the president received, he was able to overrule them and accept that that the constitution-making process should be included. But I still want to make the point that...
In such a case, a leading politician at that time, as you are, and you still are, Was it not prudent for you to have made a public stand of what was going on then, rather than pointing fingers to an already decided opposition by then?
There are situations where you speak out in the public domain, and there are other situations when you, as an advisor, you advise privately, because if you shout about advice everywhere, then it will no longer be advice, and your role is to advise and not to insist that what you say must be done.
All right, Prof, let's talk of the latest appearing that you made before the Senate Oversight Committee on Wednesday, which was yesterday. The Auditor General's report found out loopholes in stalled projects worth 146 million shillings, which begs the question, and I believe this was a question that you were asked as well in the Senate yesterday. It seems as though one would argue that feasibility tests for these stalled projects in Makueni County were not done.
I think this is actually the second time when we were appearing for that year, the 2017-18. Initially, Senate came to Kitui, and that time I was traveling abroad, so I was not able to attend. And actually, there was a social media document which was not signed by anybody, which was given to one senator, and that senator gave it to another senator. One senator from our region gave it to another senator who introduced it, and it was not signed. It was not a petition properly introduced, and it had things that were completely not correct. Then there was a ruling by Senate that the EACC, the DCI should be given that document. And later the Auditor General's people were told to come to Makueni and to be able to examine where those projects were. And unfortunately, and they said this in the meeting, they didn't have money from October to now to come and look at those projects. So if they had done so, they would have found that, you know, those projects had been completed. Most of them had been completed, but because we can't force them to come, so we are waiting for them to do so. And actually, we gave a letter to Senate. That was the first thing that we did, saying that this is what we have done regarding what you ask us. And actually,
then Prof, let me interject you at that point. Is the committee, the Senate committee, then wrong to say that some of the various reasons that were given by your county, Makueni County, includes lack of resources, scarcity of land, and change of projects for stalled projects?
But if one looks carefully, because we have a service delivery unit, we have an M&E unit, and we promised that within 2 weeks we would bring all that information, even if the Auditor General people don't come to Makueni, we will bring that information again. If one looks at what we have done, and because our projects are usually approved by a project management committee, the citizens themselves, and they would be the first ones to tell you whether something is finished or not. So I think, and Senator Ayako said, if they came to Makueni, would they find that those projects have been done, the majority of them, except where there have been problems of there is no land, somebody promised land, then they withdrew, some land is public land, and stuff like that. If there is a borehole where there was only money to dig it, and in another year there would be money to distribute the water. Our work is of a high quality, and that is why the Auditor General himself in 2017-18 gave us a verdict of unqualified. That is a clean report. But I think there are people who think that counties should not get those reports.
All right, Prof, I understand we are out of time. Nonetheless, one last question. You say you want to be, or you are already, the voice of Wanjiku, and now that Wanjiku is watching, yes. Wanjiku in reference to the people, your parting shots probably to the people who are watching you tonight.
I am doing what, sorry, I didn't hear that.
You said you are the voice of Wanjiku in reference to the people. I'm giving you 30 seconds to talk to the people who are watching this show tonight as we finalize.
Yes, thank you very much for this invitation, and I really want to say that we are going to the ballot together in 2 years' time, and I'm going to make sure that we discuss the things that you want for our president to do. We will crowdsource the ideas, the vision, so that it's different. It's not like people just imposing ideas on you, manifestos which they never implement. So we are going to have really a good time developing what we want to do for our country together and doing it together with a lot of integrity.
All right, Professor Kivutha Kibwana, Makueni Governor, thank you for making time for us tonight on TV47 News Tonight.
Na asante sana, nashukuru. Thank you very much.
All right, that is Makueni Governor, Professor Kivutha Kibwana, who was talking to us. Of course, we talked of matters, his presidency that he already declared, showing interest in wanting to vie come 2022. Of course, this discussion doesn't end here. Your comment as well is welcomed. Keep sending messages on 22047 and use the hashtag TV47 News Tonight. Time for us to take a short break, but I will be back with sports news after this break.